Hello and welcome back to Slick Willy Fly. So today what we're going to do is something I promised a while back. A while back we made this craft fur snook slider with a weed guard. There's my little weed guard. And I promised that I would make a bucktail version. So here's a bucktail version of the exact same fly. So let's get in on it. Let's make it. So what is the difference between my craft fur version and my bucktail version? Well, essentially the biggest difference is the sink rate. The craft fur will sink at a much quicker rate than the bucktail. So we're going to start out. This is a 100 denier. This is like, I don't know what you call this color, but it's not really orange. It's not really brown, but I think it just looks really great. And it will, when I do the UV resin, it kind of turns a little bit brown. But I think it goes really good with, I'm going to use yellow bucktail for this fly. And I just think it looks good with that color combo. Now, this fly can be tied in any color. In the vise, I have a size 2 stainless saltwater hook. I'm going to move some stuff away here. I'm going to make a little bit of a trash pile. This fly, I would not consider really a beginner level, although I don't think it's a difficult fly to tie. But working with the deer hair makes it a little bit more complicated than the average fly. So essentially there's two ways to think about tying this fly. The first way is you can go ahead and at the point where I'm at now, put your dumbbell eyes. Now, I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to put my dumbbell eyes a little bit later. I'm going to stack some of this deer hair first. I think it's easier to do it that way and apply the dumbbell eyes after. For dumbbell eyes, I'm going to be using black with Chartruese, size extra small. But they're just going to sit here and wait a little bit. So I'm going to use two different types of deer hair. I'm going to use a regular bucktail for the tail portion. And then I'm going to use this clump of just yellow dyed deer hair for when I make the body of the fly. So I'm going to take a little clump. It doesn't have to be super big. I like to make the flies a little bit sparse. I think that they swim better. They definitely cast easier when they're not overly thick. So I just cut a piece of deer hair, not very thick at all once you spin it tight. And I don't want any of the shorts, so I'm just pinching and pulling out everything that's short. I'm doing it low to the table. I don't know if you can see it or not in the video, but it would make such a mess if I did it higher where you could see it. So I think you understand why I'm doing it this way. So now I want a little bit of a long tail. When we attach the deer hair to this fly, it covers a good amount of the tail. So I'm going to go ahead and do like probably 2 full hook shanks so that the tail has a little bit of a tail. So there's 1 and there's 2 hook shanks. Now I'm not going to trim this yet, but I am going to trim the tag. So I'm going to give this a couple of loose wraps like I normally do. And now I'm going to distribute a little bit around the hook shank because I want it to be a tail. Now I can pull this tight and I can wrap this tight. You can use that hole. It won't hurt anything to use it. But I'm probably going to... actually, you know what? If I use it, it'll give me an exact location for the dumbbell eyes because that actually worked out perfect for the dumbbell eyes. I could put the dumbbell eyes right up against that deer hair, and that's going to work really well. And that was just pure luck, actually. So now I'm going to add my flash. For flash, I'm going to add two types of flash. I'm going to add a strand or two of yellow, and I'm going to add one strand of copper. This is a fly that I think needs a little bit of flash, because there won't be any flash in the body. So the entire flash, if you will, for this fly is going to be in the tail region. Now, I am going to put some rubber legs, and the rubber legs will give this quite a bit of action as well. Alright, so I have one yellow, maybe I get one more yellow. The yellow blends in so well with the deer hair that I don't mind giving it an extra yellow. Sometimes it's hard to pull out just one. There we go. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to fold all of this in half. And of course I didn't really line it up perfectly, which is great because that'll help me with a stagger. I'm going to go ahead and put it on my thread. About, I guess that looks about halfway. And then I'm going to just take it and put it on the hook, making that V, which will basically put it on either side. I'm going to make sure that I like the placement before I really crank down on this. Nice. And now I can open those loops. I realize that all this flash is too long, and we will trim this all up soon enough. Nice. So now we're going to put some rubber legs. For rubber legs, I didn't get them ready actually, which is my fault. I'm going to use, I have a lot of options. I think I'm going to use, this green would look pretty cool, but no, not going to do it. I'm going to go with my gold pumpkin flake. And 2 or 3 strands is plenty. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut them off of here. Instead of, a lot of times you'll see me just rip them off. But it's easier for me if I keep them attached to each other until I'm done with tying this fly. Just make my life a little bit easier. So again, I'm going to put them on the thread. This time I'm going to try to be a little bit careful in that I get them pretty much even. I'm going to put them on the center of the hook, making sure that I divide up their placement the way I want. Just like that. And now you just crank down on them and they're locked in. And by doing them this way, it really stay right where you want them. All right, so now I've got all that ready. So now it's time to start putting on some deer hair. So I'm going to take my colored deer hair, this little patch right here, and I'm just going to cut a little clump. I do this personally, I do this in small clumps. I do not do this in large clumps. Again, I pinch and I pull away all the short fibers. because I don't want any of these short fibers. So now I'm going to take this, I'm going to use the entire little clump, makes this little patch kind of perfect. 2 loose wraps. Now I'm going to use my fingers to distribute this deer hair best I can around the hook. And before I pull tight, just going to make sure that I've got it pretty much around the hook, and I do. So now I'm going to hold in my left hand, and I'm going to wrench this tight. It's almost like spinning deer hair, but not really. And I'm going to crank that nice and tight. I'm going to work this all forward and make like a little wall behind. Alright, so now let's just repeat the process. We're going to repeat the process, and after each clump, we're going to go ahead and use a little packing tool. Alright, so let's repeat. Remember, you always take away the little fluffies on the bottom. Now, as I start making these now, I'm not worried about putting the tips in the same location. I'm actually going to just grab the deer hair kind of in the middle, 2 loose wraps again, just like before, distribute. Now it's more about just getting good coverage. Making sure I'm all the way around, and crank that tight. A couple of turns. Start pulling all this back and grab that just like that. And then you can use your packing tool. I happen to have a homemade packing tool, and you can actually just make sure you pack that nice and tight. The tighter that you pack this, the nicer your head will be when you trim it. So just keep that in mind. You know, there's really absolutely no reason. I find it curious that so many people who are just awesome fly tiers seem to be a little bit like nervous when they use deer hair. Deer hair is easy to work with. It's a little messy, for sure messy, but it's no problem to work with deer hair at all. So now we're just going to repeat this process. Making sure that we distribute each and every time. As we work our way forward. And again, I'm going to pack, because packing is what makes this fly look good. So when we talk about the sink rate, the deer hair wants to float. It just does. The dumbbell eyes that I use aren't so much to make this fly sink. That the fly is going to sink. It's just not going to sink as quickly as that craft fair version will sink. The dumbbell eyes are more like a keel. It's to make this fly ride hook side up. I'm still going to use a weed guard, because you know, I'm assuming that I'm going to be throwing this thing up into the mangroves. So that's really why I want the weed guard more than anything. So I just keep stroking everything back. Get my packing tool out. I think I'm going to put one more clump and then the dumbbell eyes. You notice I'm not using big clumps at all. I'm using very small clumps. I want this fly to sink. I want this fly to be sparse. I want this fly to cast, you know, well and simply. I don't want this to be a challenge. And I find that if I have too much materials on a fly, they don't cast well. Not for me anyway. Maybe I'm not a proficient enough caster. But I find that they cast better if I don't have a ton of materials on the fly. All right, it's time for my dumbbell eyes. Now, normally, eyes are easier to tie on when you don't have all this material. But in this particular fly, I wouldn't have the space or the ability to pack, really, had I done the dumbbell eyes earlier. Now, this is a little bit difficult. It's going to be a little bit more difficult for you to see because I need to push these dumbbell eyes up against the deer hair so that I have room to put in my weed guard. So a couple of X wraps in one direction, now a couple of more in the other. I am going to trap a little bit of deer hair and I will trim it all out. This is really the only reason that I say that this fly is maybe not a beginner level. It's because of things like this. So I'm putting on now my figure eights under, like I always do. And I'm going to say that that's basically the eyes are on there. Now I am going to use UV resin, which will really keep the eyes on there. I'm going to just carefully take a second to trim away any of these trapped fibers. And this is a very good place where I would use my needle and a lighter and just singe away a little bit of fibers. But I'll do that after I get my weed guard on. Alright, so now I'm going to take a second to clean because I'm done with the deer hair. Well, I'm actually not done with the deer hair, but I'm done with the first portion of the deer hair. We have to trim this fly. So we're not done with the deer hair. So now I'm going to get a little bit of my hard mono. I'm not as prepared for today's fly as I normally am. But I'm going to go ahead and cut off a little piece of hard mono here. Don't need much. And for this fly, what I like to do is I like to give it a flat spot. So I come in, you can use needle nose pliers, you can use, you know, any tool you like. I happen to have this little plier that's flat on both sides. I got an electrical supply house. And I'm just going to go ahead and give it that flat spot, which will make it super easy for me to just lock it in where I want it. Just like that. Gonna give this a couple more X wraps. And now we can give this a whip finish. Find my whip finish tool. Now I will say this, it would have been so much simpler to trim up this fly if I didn't have a weed guard. having the weed guard definitely is going to make the trimming of this fly more difficult. You're going to have to be careful that we don't cut off the weed guard. So how do I trim up this fly? Well, the longer, I'll show you here, the longer that first clump of deer hair, I don't want to cut those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my razor and I'm basically going to stroke up. But I have to make sure that I don't go all the way to where I cut off this little bit, that first clump of deer hair. So we're just going to come in here, start right at the eyes, and we're going to carefully just come in and just start shaving a little bit. And I suggest that you really take your time when you do this, because you cannot put the hair back. So just take your time, take a little at a time. There's nothing wrong with using scissors also. Every now and then just stop and clean it all up and see what you actually have. Just like that. Now for the under, I have no choice. I'm going to have to use scissors because of the weed guard. Now how much time you take trimming up, that's, you know, that's entirely up to you. But I'm starting to like the way this looks. Now what I need to do is I need to trim up the crystal flash, and I need to trim up the rubber legs. So I don't like to trim all the crystal flash at the same time. I like to give it a bit of a stagger. And there's no way, if I do them a little individually like this, there's literally no way that I can, that I could be the same length. The length that I'm looking for is maybe slightly longer than the tail. And then I do the same with the rubber legs. And I do them separately as well. Just slightly longer than the tail again. And that's about it. Oh, I have to trim the weed guard. There's a couple of pieces of crystal flash here that a little long. For the weed guard, I like to trim it about 1/8 of an inch longer than the point of the hook. I'm going to trim it a hair long right now, because I always trim them, I think, a hair long, and then I trim them as I go. Now, this fly will swim hook up, and the rubber legs are going to want to float. That's why I put them in the orientation that I put them. So in the water, everything's going to come up like that. So the last thing to do is a little bit of UV resin on the knot. So I'm just going to use a little bit of my regular consistency UV resin. That looks pretty clean. This really is not a hard fly to tie. It's maybe not the best fly if it's the first fly you've ever tied. You know, maybe you should tie a couple of flies before you jump into something like this. But it's not a difficult fly. So just make sure that you like the way everything's sitting. A couple of good spins. That looks really nice. And now this knot basically is bulletproof. I'm probably going to take a few more minutes and just trim this up a little more. You know, for the length of the video, I didn't really want to spend too much time trimming, but I think you understand what I mean of how to trim and how it should look. This is for me an inshore snook, redfish, sea trout, you know, tarpon. This is a fly that I would absolutely cast up into the mangroves and see if I can't show it to you. And there it is, the Snook Slider. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you give it a try. It's a great fly. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope you're having a good time tying flies with me, because I'm having a great time. It was -8 degrees Fahrenheit this morning, so not a lot of fishing going on over here for me, but I do get my fix tying flies. So thank you for watching, like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.